the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is now in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor.
I'm to advise that I've had communication from Senators Lisa Cummins, Kevin Boyce, and Monique Tate. And they unfortunately will not be able to be with us today. Here's another. Yes, thank you. And I've been recently advised that Senator Jerome Walcott is in all likelihood wouldn't be with us today as well.
Presentation of petitions. Presentation of papers.
Mr. President, I am commanded to lay the following documents. The annual reports of the Judicial Council for the years 2016, 2017, and 2018. The annual report and audited financial statements of the Caves of Barbados Limited for the financial years ended March 31st, 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. The annual report of the Barbados Prison Service for the year 2018, the audited financial statements of the Board of Management of St. James Secondary School for the financial years ended March 31st, 2009 to March 31st, 2011. Audited financial statements of the Board of Management of the Dighton Griffith Secondary School for the years ended March 31st, 2017 and 2019. The audited financial statements of the Student Revolving Loan Fund for the years ended March 31st, 2018 and 2019. The ministerial statement on feed-in tariffs and auctions for renewable energy technologies. And finally, sir, the Health Services Communicable and Notifiable Diseases Amendment Regulations 2020.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to business or sitting of the Senate are moved by a minister.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 45-2 for the remainder of this sitting so that we may complete the Caribbean Community Movement of Skilled Nationals Amendment Bill 2020 in all its stages.
The question is that Standing Order 45-2 be suspended for the balance of today's sitting. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And the Standing Order 45-2 is therefore suspended for the balance of today's sitting.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. President, I beg to move the first reading of the Caribbean Community Movement of Skills Nationals Amendment Bill 2020.
The question is that the Caribbean Community Movement of Skilled Nationals Act 2020 be read a first time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Public business. Order number 1 in the name of the acting leader of the Senate to move the second reading of the Caribbean Community Movement of Skilled Nationals Amendment Bill 2020.
Mr. C.
Mr. President, as I stand to introduce the bill before this honorable House, for those who celebrate Valentine's Day, I wish you all a very happy Valentine's Day, and I trust this will be a day of love, sir, here in this honorable Senate.
She's assuming other work.
Mr. President, it was in July 2001 that the Caribbean community established what is called the CARICOM Single Market and Economy. And we did so, sir, by signing what is called the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. And it is that revised treaty to which I will refer throughout this presentation. The SME, which while established in 2001, it was not formally launched, sir, until a few years later, in 2006. And since that formal launch, the Conference of Heads of Government, which is that supreme decision-making organization of the Caribbean community, as well as other organs of the community, they have taken many decisions to deepen the integration process in the region, how we collaborate, how we work together, how we harmonize our policies and our systems so we can function as one market, ideally, of course, and nothing is ever ideal, but in step with each other. When such decisions are made, though, Mr. President, the decisions made by either the Conference of Heads of Governments or other organs of the Caribbean community, they may not only necessitate amendments to the revised treaty to which I spoke and to other related instruments. These decisions also require, sir, that governments such as Barbados and other member states also make amendments to the laws in our own countries to give effect to the community's decisions. So why this bill, sir? Because this bill now before the Honorable House, the Caribbean Community Movement of Skilled Nationals Amendment Bill, it allows Barbados to make changes to our domestic law to carry out the decisions of the community as it relates to the movement of skilled persons. And the intention is that such skilled persons or skilled nationals would be able to move free of hassle and impediment throughout the Caribbean region, or at least through those countries that participate in the movement of skills regime. And I say that, sir, because the movement of skills regime within the Caribbean community and within the CSME is only one of 5 such regimes. The others are the provision of services, the trade in goods, the rights of establishment, and the movement of capital. And so the movement of skills is just one of the 5 regimes that are part of the Caribbean single market and economy. And sir, the authority for this comes also from Article 240 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas that reads, if I may quote, sir, the member states will undertake to act expeditiously to give effect to decisions of competent organs and bodies in their municipal law. Furthermore, Mr. President, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the highest court recognized by Barbados and the final authority on disputes relating to interpretation and the application of the revised treaty, that CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, it states in paragraph 52 of its judgment, Shanique Myrie versus the state of Barbados, that, and I quote, sir, with your permission, it is the obligation of each state having consented to the creation of a community obligation to ensure that its domestic law, at least in its application, reflects and supports community law. I started here, Mr. President, to share why the government of Barbados, as a signatory to the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, is not just obligated, but we are also, sir, keen to fulfill our regional commitments as a good regional partner. So what does the bill propose? The bill proposes to amend the categories of persons who are eligible to be recognized as skilled community nationals. That's the first thing, to amend the categories. Secondly, to amend the provisions relating to the indefinite stay of skilled community nationals and their dependents. And thirdly, other related matters, because we know as we deal with the categories and we deal with the other issues related to their stay, there will be other issues that have to be, other matters that would need to be amended. Mr. President, you would know that for persons to qualify under the movement of skills regime, they must possess some kind of CARICOM certificate that recognizes their skills. And they're allowed to seek employment in any of the participating states without a work permit and to remain indefinitely in that country. Where we started would have been with Article 46, sir, of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas that identified 5 categories of skill. And it had to be graduates of the University of the West Indies, media workers, our journalists and others, sports persons, our cricketers and our soccer players, our athletes, etc., our artists, and our musicians. Barbados was supportive, and indeed Barbados granted access for CARICOM nationals with these skills the right to seek employment in Barbados. But over the years, sir, the Conference of Heads of Governments, they increased the number of categories of skilled workers who could benefit from the movement of skills regime, adding on to those 5 that I just mentioned. These categories, these expanded categories, along with the year that they were approved, were that artisans with CARICOM vocational qualification, the CVQ. In 2006, they were added. Non-graduate professional teachers were also added in 2006. Non-graduate professional nurses were added in 2006. Holders of an associate degree and comparable qualifications, they were added a year later in 2007. Household domestics with a CVQ, with a CARICOM vocational qualification or equivalent qualification, they were added in 2009, sir. And agricultural workers with the CVQ or a Certificate of Practical Experience, or CXC, they were added in 2018, more recently. And security guards with a CVQ and registered with an agency, they were added in 2018. While Barbados has been certainly cooperative, sir, in granting permission administratively in the categories that we recognize, we are now amending the legislation to go along with the administrative support that we have provided as good regional partners. We imagine, Mr. President, that the Caribbean community will even consider other categories in the years to come and add to that list, likely. Those categories that are of strategic importance and that allows us to be stronger together because of the movement of our people across the market. The skills regime, sir, was set up as a phased approach to what would ultimately be the free movement of all people across the region. And anticipating this, sir, paragraph 4 of Article 46 of the revised treaty, it says, and with your permission, I quote, "The conference shall keep the provisions of this article under review in order to A, enlarge as appropriate the classes of persons entitled to move and work freely in the community, and B, to monitor and secure compliance therewith." So for those who are wondering, so how does this CARICOM Skill Nationals regime work? There is an accreditation council that is part of whose responsibility it is to check the credentials to make sure that the skilled nationals do in fact have the credentials that I would have mentioned earlier. And the skilled nationals, they have the right to apply for a skills certificate either in their home country or in another member country. Once they come to Barbados or the other participating countries in this regime, they have the right to a definite entry. In other words, they're given 6 months out front. And they have the right to seek employment, sir, once the certificate is being recognized, whatever certificate they're producing as a skilled national is being recognized or verified. CARICOM nationals who are entering Barbados with a certificate issued by another member state, they are allowed to work immediately pending verification of those qualifications. Mr. President, I perhaps could go on, but I believe that this fairly describes what it is that this proposed amendment seeks to do in the letter. Mr. President, the CSME has been on a path to continuous improvement. We know that along the way, sir, we have stepped, we have stalled, and we have stumbled in the implementation of the CSME. But we've kept going. Barbados has led, and we continue to lead, in our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Moore Motley, who now takes over as chair of CARICOM. And I would trust that this Honorable House would wish to ensure that Barbados continues to lead as we consider this particular amendment and seek to have it passed. It is with these few words that I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Sir, this is one of the few times that the government has brought a measure that I can support.
That's right, you got it here.
But I still have to make a few comments because I have no difficulty, sir, with the policy that informs this bill. I'm a regionalist. I tell you, I have St. Lucian roots, and I have also connections in Guyana and elsewhere. I have children that are Guyanese. So I don't have the xenophobia that a lot of Bajans have when it comes to dealing with people people come from outside of Barbados. I don't have that. My only difficulty, sir, is we need to give the country some time to catch up with me. You see, when government brings legislation to Parliament, we shouldn't be passing it in all the stages in one day. We should let the country know what we are doing. I understand the Prime Minister looks good. She wants to set up her legacy, and get these things done for the CARICOM meeting next week. Because I got an email telling me that the Prime Minister wants this thing passed today so that it could be available for the CARICOM meeting next week. You know, that is her legacy. She already has a legacy. She has a legacy of implementing the harshest, and she's trying to cover, you know, to try to overshadow that. That will not be overshadowed. Trust me. It was heartless and was cruel.
I thought you were a little premature to be speaking of her legacy.
Yeah. No, sir. You see, a legacy don't happen overnight, sir. You develop it over time. You know, after a while, you know, people you get known for it, but you have to start somewhere. So these are the seeds. These are the seeds of her legacy, and she intends that it would grow and become a great CARICOM statesperson. You know, I remember reading once where an American politician said that a statesman is a politician who's been dead 10 or 15 years. You know, you don't become a statesman in your lifetime. But some people do, or tend to do. Sir, what I like about this legislation is that it commands the immigration officers to do certain things. It is specific. It tells the immigration officers, and it doesn't give them a discretion, this is what you must do. Because I have so much difficulty. I was an immigration officer, and when I see the things that some of my fellow officers did and continue to do to people who come to Barbados, especially CARICOM nationals, it hurts me. They deceive them. They don't tell them the truth. And even when they try to get it wrong, they realize that they've been deceived. They even get the ministers to change the law to accommodate the bad practices in immigration. I will speak to that a little later. You see, let me give you some examples. How many of you, and I'm talking about the country now, and not only people in this Senate, know that if you work for the government of Barbados for 7 years or more, under the Barbados Citizenship Act, you are entitled to citizenship. Immigration don't tell anybody. They give you something they call reside and work, and keep you there for God knows how long. Even with the skilled nationals, how they treat these people. People come to Barbados, they say, okay, well, you're a skilled national, you can come and enter Barbados and work, but you can't bring a wife. Well, I am not going to without my wife. There are certain things that wives and husbands do that you should not have you should have available to you when you are at work and away from home and away from your home country. What you expect to do. So now this piece of legislation is saying the dependents can come. So I commend this piece of legislation. It says the dependents can come, and the immigration can't stop them now. They used to stop people from bringing a wife. Well, I don't know if they had shares up at the garrison that they have to make sure that people resort to those kind of activities. They force people into situations like that. They do not. And it is a kind of xenophobia. We don't want them here. But let me tell you something. Years ago, I went to an exhibition in London where my organization was trying to get Barbadians who went overseas to invest in Barbados. And I swear I saw more Barbadians in London than I got in Barbados. Trust me when I tell you that. I was so overwhelmed. I'm walking going down the street and I hear this voice. They say, I hear Belgian voice. Who says, yeah, I've been here for 26 years. You could still recognize my Belgian voice? Yeah. We got Belgians all over the place. But Belgians don't seem to want anybody else to come here. At least certain sections. Because let me tell you something. People at the lower level would have integrated long ago, but for politicians and a lot of other xenophobic people. You know, we have a situation where people mix naturally. They come to Barbados and they're embraced by the average man in the street. But it is official, it is rules and all kinds of impositions that immigration and other laws put in people on them that stop people from really mixing and becoming a community with us. It is not what the people want. This is what the people want. You know, the people want to be able to mix with their brothers and sisters from the other islands. It is since we've become independent, and everybody now has their own little island, and everybody wanted to show that we are kings and queens in our places and stuff. That has prevented the integration. I remember some years ago, an old friend of mine told me that he saw me in Grenada, and he shouted for me, and I didn't answer. I said, I have never set foot in Grenada. And he insists, you think I don't know you? I said, I've never been to Grenada. Well, as luck would have it, one of my uncles was doing some training with people over the Israeli islands. He had some computer business. And as it turned out, when he got to the class, a guy said, you are here with? He said, yeah. He said, we got a fellow in Grenada look just like you. Apparently, it was one of my grandfather's relatives or brothers or something who went adrift, landed in Grenada, and never came back. Said his own little family down there. He didn't have a birth certificate, he had nothing, but he was embraced. And he set up a branch of our family in Grenada. You know, so it is the people, the average people who mix. It is the officialdom who have been stopping that natural mixing of people, of Caribbean people. So I'm glad that this piece of legislation now is on doing what has been happening in the past. But, sir, my caution. We have a situation where now you're going to allow security guards, I mean they're allowed already, we just put in legislation in place that they can bring their families and stuff. But, sir, we must be cautious. When we bring people into Barbados at the level of security guards and domestics and agricultural workers, government must follow through and put minimum wage legislation in place to protect them. Not only our local jobs, but must protect them from exploitation. Because I know of a company in Barbados who has been paying $7 and $7.50 an hour for security guards. Yes. Senator Moore can tell you. And you fight the unions tooth and nail, insisting that they can't pay anymore. I don't even want to recognize unions. So what government needs to do, yes, let our brothers and sisters come and let us go elsewhere. But when people come here, you have to protect them from exploitation. I have, as I said, sir, no difficulty with the legislation as it stands. I only have difficulty in the mad rush to do it, this legacy building thing. But the legislation itself, I am not troubled by. I just want to caution you about that aspect of it, where people can come here and be exploited too. Because we know some countries in the Caribbean, if you pay a guy $100 Barbados a day, when he goes home with that $100 and he sends it home, for after a few months, he's a millionaire in his currency. But we must not allow people to come here and pay them substandard wages that are substandard for Barbados purposes, and exploit them and prevent our local people from getting jobs because they are willing to take less. Put a regime in place that says if you're going to hire anybody, local, regional, or international persons, you can't pay them less than this amount. I don't know what the amount would be or what it should be for whatever categories. I am not that skilled. What I can tell you is it is a necessity. We have people who come here to work as domestics, and they're enslaved. People hold a passport. And sometimes the husbands want to integrate them into the family even more than domestics. And when they do not comply, or rather acquiesce to that invitation to join the family, they take the passports, immigration, and get it put out. we need to stop this behavior. Because I know of a situation where a young lady, she was adopted from Guyana. Young child, minor. And the husband wanted to invite her even closer. And when she didn't, she was left abandoned. And thankfully, I have a lot of problems with my daughter, but my daughter was gracious enough to take her in. So I know what I'm talking about. And that made me very proud of her, because all the trouble she gave me for all the years that she's on earth, she still had these good qualities where she would take in some person who needed it and was desperate, left her to the wind. So we have to protect people who come from overseas from these excesses. It is not a one-off situation that I'm talking about. These things happen. We've had exploitation at the level where you go to the immigration department and we have officers who want concubines in order for those persons to get the stay that they're entitled to in Barbados. It has happened a lot. And when people come to this country, they should not be exploited in this way. Mind you, I've never had to do that. I'm charming enough as it is, so I'm usually sought after, but a lot of them are not. Sir, there is another aspect that I want to deal with. To show you the exploitation that has been happening, or the abuse that's been happening to people from overseas. I remember, I never appeared before the Immigration Appeals Committee. I understand we now have a new, more enlightened chairman who has been doing some good work in that process, reversing, and the chairman is smiling, who's been doing some good work and reviewing some of the excesses that have been dumped on people of this country. Because I understand, where immigration officers come from, because people come to you and they lie. And after a while, you believe that everybody is telling you a lie. You get that kind of, you build up that kind of mentality. I think that's when you need to change, don't go and do something else and come back, because you think that every person that is coming to you is telling you a lie, so you doubt them first. And then, even when they produce this other documentation you need, you still reject them. And you find ways to interpret the law to stop them. Case in point, the 1979 student visa regulations. They have been amended in the last administration because the immigration couldn't trick people with those anymore. Those regulations were only required, and those student visas were only required for persons who come to Barbados, study, and go home and come back when the term starts again, and you will get your student visas. They were never ever intended for persons who live here. But as time went on, the Immigration Department would issue student visas to the children of persons who are immigrants or permanent residents. Persons who were those children were also entitled to become immigrants, but the Immigration Department would not issue that document, or would not send it to the minister for the minister to approve it. What they did, they gave them student visas and let them go to school. I know of one case, because I represented the young lady that I will talk about. She came to Barbados from Guyana when she was 2 weeks old. And when she wanted to go to school, mind you, the father was a citizen of Barbados by descent. His father was Barbadian. But citizenship it's not like sin. It does not go on the third and fourth generations. It only goes to the next generation and stop. So he cannot give citizenship to his children that came from Guyana with him. So they were given student visas. And at age 18, having lived in Barbados for 18 years, the immigration department says, you are not in school anymore. You don't have any stay in Barbados because time on a student visa did not count toward any other status like citizenship or immigration. So basically, they were saying to that child, you have to start fresh, but we are not giving you, so you got to go back to Guyana. The girl don't know Guyana, but that abuse happened to countless people. They were entitled. I know it doesn't happen now because you're dealing with that, and I commend you too. When you do good things, I will say so. You know, I presented that case for that young lady before the committee, and I pointed out what the regulations said, that she was entitled to immigrant status all those years before. And the immigration department was so angry, they prevailed upon the minister to change the regulations to accommodate their bad practices. They do it all the time. Nurses at the QEH came from Guyana, worked 10 years, and then they want to move on, they want to do something else. So they tell them, no. But mind you, the Citizenship Act, Section 4, I think it is, says that if you have 7 years living or working for the government or a combination of both for 7 years, you can become a citizen. You wouldn't tell them anything. I remember one day, a lady came to see me, and when they pointed out to her, she couldn't believe me. She said, but just left immigration, the boy tell me so. I went, took up a copy of the act, showed it to her, and they filled out the forms for her. I signed up for the forms and filled them out. The next day, about 10 nurses were in my office asking me to help them with their forms because they were all being abused by officialdom, people who don't want them out here. And I caution officers to tell them it is not their decision. They are functionaries. They must carry out government policy. And if the government says, whether you like it or not, that this is what we must do, this is what you do. If you don't like it, find another job. I don't care what anybody tells me. They might tell me, oh, you're trade unionists and you're telling people, I am a man with a conscience first. And I'm saying to you, if you have a difficulty carrying out the government policy and the law, then you are in the wrong job. Find something else to do. Emigrate, do whatever you want, but follow the law. The law is now saying that your wife and children can come, your dependents can come. And I don't know why they want to stop people. Barbados is a small society. And everybody knows everybody else. And then I go to St. Lucie and I hear, oh yeah, you got family all down here and stuff. So my cancer hunting was severely limited because of family connections all over the place. I had to have many family connections again and all kind of stuff. So it helps cross-fertilization. You're bringing new blood into Barbados. So I don't see why you want to stop them. Right? So, sir, as I said, this is one of the few pieces of legislation that the government has brought that I can support. All I want, sir, is that the government start rushing to do these things. And I want to speak on one thing too, because we bring people here and exploit them, but we're exploiting people even at the level of the immigration department. Last year, 15 data entry operators from the immigration department were sent home, September, October. And I'm telling you this to show you the people that we have to manage this process, that should be managing this process. And they were told, well, you know, the new automation at the airport where you just go and look at the machine and type in this thing and you don't have to see an immigration officer for all that processing. So you don't need the cards that you used to fill out before, the ED cards, the entry departure cards that you had before. You don't need them. They were the people who used to key them things in. They're off. And some for 20 years or so, they didn't receive a cent. They complained to the minister. The minister told them, you got a good case if it was still in private practice. Good case if he was still in private practice. But he is no longer in private practice, and he does not have the decency to tell the permanent secretary in that ministry or the chief immigration officer what you're doing is wrong. All he is saying to the workers is that you have a good case if he was still in private practice. It would have been a good case for him. He is actually telling them to put the government in court. Rather, if he can recognize that he's the minister. So I got angry and I called him. And he told me, but you of all people know don't employ nobody. I said, I'm not asking you to employ anybody. All I'm asking you to do is to speak to your officials and tell them what they're doing is wrong. You know? So, be exploiting our local, even at level of immigration. And if a person who sits at the top of this thing, because no, pivotal to this piece of legislation is going to be the minister responsible for immigration. And if he has so callous, even dealing with his own, I don't know what he will do with the people out there. It's about time the Prime Minister move him and relieve the burden that he's placed on the necks of the workers that he's supposed to be responsible for. Don't give him more responsibility now under this piece of legislation, because I will know what he would do. Sir, that was an aside. And I'm going to sit now, sir, and I'm going to say I like this legislation. It is in keeping with who I am. I welcome visitors. I welcome our CARICOM nationals that come to Barbados and behave. I embrace them. As a matter of fact, I embraced one this morning. She's my wife. All right? CARICOM national. She drew her first breath in St. Lucia. You can't look at her and say that that's the case. You can't look at anybody and see that they come from anywhere else. Treat people well. Sir, with those few remarks, sir, I support this legislation, and I will urge, but I know the government side will support it, and I will urge the members of the independent senators to do likewise. Sir, I'm obliged to you.
I next recognize Senator Greenidge.
Mr. President, I've made a few notes, and I want to say that I support this legislation, support the amendments to the bill. And I want to begin, sir, by saying that, first of all, this is not a Mayor Motley's initiative. This legislation, if I remember correctly, I remember hearing a debate on this sometime in 2003. So this is just about continuity of government. And what we are doing in this particular piece of legislation is we're doing, sir, almost the entire Caribbean community has pledged to do. We are not sticking our heads out, sticking our necks out. We are trying to get all of the Caribbean to move along on the same path. Yes, sir, we may be a little bit more advanced in our legislation than some of our neighbors, but we see what we are doing as Barbados' contribution to regionalism. I believe, sir, that one of these good days, we should be able to say that the entire Caribbean is our country. One country. As West Indian people, sir, we have to integrate. Put as simple as possible. What we're trying to do here, the initiative means that Barbadians can go to other Caribbean islands and work, and in return, Caribbean workers can come here and work as well. So the overarching point has to be made that Caribbean islands cannot achieve anything tangible by themselves, separately. It's not going to be possible in this world of ours. We are all involved, sir, in what can only be described as a common destiny. And we have to unite as Caribbean people or perish. And you know, sir, I was a teacher for years. And whenever I got to the Federation, that part of our history, regardless of which could be a A-level class or a O-level class, I did that lesson one way. I went into that class and I had one stick. Not 6, 8 inches, whatever. And I would always tell the smallest girl in the class, I'd try to pick with the small one and say, come and break this for me. And she would break it. And then I would have maybe about 8 or 10 together, tied. And I would tell you, try, you break this for me. Invariably, she couldn't break it. And it is it is there and then that I began to teach the lesson on federation. And it is there and then that we talked about the federation and where it broke up. That if we try to move through this world one by one by one, we're going to fail. But if we come together as a group, it is much more difficult for anyone to destroy us. And we can be successful. And as I said, I've always used that as the preliminary to my teaching, federation, Carifta, whatever you're going to be teaching in that area. Mr. President, I think too that some of our politicians have to carry a little bit of the blame sometimes. Because I believe, sir, that the message has to go forward. It has to go to the international world that the Caribbean must be respected as a unit, must be respected as a bloc. And we are a powerful bloc, and we are a powerful unit. At international meetings, sir, it is my view that the Caribbean, as far as possible, must speak with one voice. Must speak with one voice. I have had incidents at the ILO where you would think that one was from Biafra and one was from my own Caribbean people at ILO conference. And we in the Caribbean have to learn to speak as one. I remember instances of when you wanted a big official, and the Caribbean was broken up into about 6 or 7 groups. This body talked to me first, and that body talked to me first, and so on. We have to carry some of this blame. That's the only way, sir, that we're going to earn the respect of the international world. And if we do not take this approach, Mr. President, what happened a few weeks will always continue to happen. when the United States invited a handful of Caribbean people, Caribbean leaders, sir, and excluded the ones that they were not comfortable with. We have to take some of that blame. We have to show them that we can put up a united front. We are strong. We have too many members, and every one is a vote. Every one. But we would allow people to divide and rule us. We have to carry some of the blame too. Mr. President, sir, I do recall as a schoolboy, and sir, even when I was at university, I realized that there were certain countries in the Caribbean that had a lot of work to be done, but not enough workers to do that work. And the opposite was also true, that there were some countries with a lot of workers, but no work for them to do. And I do believe, sir, that this free movement of workers, skilled workers in the Caribbean, is something of a balancing act and something of a leveling out of that problem of supply and demand where workers are concerned. I do believe, Mr. President, that this particular legal framework, which is before us today, is the best way to achieve this balance. You know, sir, we can't be Caribbean people when we're talking about the CCJ. We can't be Caribbean people only when we are speaking of the University of the West Indies. We can't be Caribbean people, sir, when the West Indies cricket team beat England, sir. We can't be Caribbean people, sir, only when Usain Bolt is destroying or has destroyed the competition. Because it is not the correct thing for us to be Caribbean people only in times of accomplishment, only in times of success. We must also be Caribbean people too, sir, in times of struggle and in times of difficulty. And that point has to be made. We have to stick together through thick and thin. We cannot either, Mr. President, close our eyes to what Barbadians around us are saying. We cannot, sir. We may not always agree with what those close to us are saying, but we cannot dismiss their concerns either. This is like a double-edged sword. Some people will talk against this kind of legislation. Some people will, but we can't dismiss them. I believe that all of us in here are ad idem on this particular piece of legislation. But we cannot dismiss or literally diss, you don't even have to add the miss, the ones who are speaking against it. I remember, sir, I used to be Minister of Sports. And on about 2 or 3 occasions, I'm sure about 2 occasions, the Carifta Games had to be hosted by one island. In this case, it was one this time and one the next time. And on each occasion, the island which was supposed to be the host nation said, we aren't organized, we aren't ready. Let somebody else do it. And I volunteered on 2 occasions. And you know that it did not go down well, because people said to me, every time that somebody drops it, why is it that Barbados has to be the one to pick it up? Why is it that every time Liat look as though it is going to crash, not literally crash, you know what? That Barbados is the first one to put out its hand to bail out Liat? Yes, we want to be seen as a good example for Caribbean unity, but we have to draw the line somewhere. This is what people are saying, and you cannot dismiss what the people are saying. You have to listen to them. That someone else must take up the slack sometimes. It cannot be Barbados all the time. We cannot keep striving to be the nicest country in the Caribbean to our detriment, sir. And people are saying it, and yes, we have to pay some attention to it as well. The other thing I've heard them say, sir, is that when we bring these these Caribbean people into Barbados, that we have to make sure that the need is there for those people. We have to make sure that when people apply, there's need for what they are applying for. Some people may want to come to Barbados only because others are coming. And they're coming here, but they do not know where they are going or what they are coming to do. And sir, what would happen in a case like that is that they would end up almost like dead weight, waiting for something to do, which is something that we cannot entertain at all. And we are not to give them the belief that we are guaranteeing them, if they come here, work. And if listen to the people and listen to them. And these are some of the points I've heard people make. I remember Haitians came here, and the Haitians said, we understand that we could come here and work. That has nothing to do with commission. So where the particular topic is concerned, Mr. President, all Barbadians will not see eye to eye on it. I know that some people are what Senator Franklin referred to as xenophobic. Some people are myopic. They can, but we have to listen to them. And, I don't even know if this is the place to make the point. But I can tell you what I've heard with my own ears. I've heard one female say that all those girls from Guyana and so on are coming here to do is to grab up the foolish men but where? I have heard that come to grab up the foolish men but where? But all I'm saying though is that there is need for us to listen, just to listen. And it is a pity, sir, that some people see it that way. It's a pity. But listen to them. We have to talk to them, and we have to allay their fears. And we have to show them that we should embrace all Caribbean people. Literally embrace them. I believe, Mr. President, that if a lawyer comes to Barbados to work, I believe, sir, that he will employ a Barbadian secretary, Barbadian legal clerk. I believe so. And we have to remember that these nationals who are coming here, sir, they will do business here in Barbados. And I feel that some employment will be created. I don't necessarily see everything like some people, that there will be this negative. I also believe, sir, that this initiative has the potential, sir, to improve inter-island travel. Because I feel that persons will work here. I believe that if they're working here, that their friends and their relatives will visit them. And plain and simple. You know, so let us not close our eyes to that particular possibility either, that it may very well improve inter-island travel. Rather than going to Miami, for instance, for a holiday, someone may say, let us go to Trinidad, let us go to Barbados, St. Lucia, where Aunt Jennifer is working as a nurse. I mean, let's go and look for her. And at least we'll have somewhere to stay, we'll stay by her. So I do believe that in that way, so it will encourage some inter-island travel. I come to the part now, sir, where my caution, again, is that certification or other qualification that should not be taken lightly. That's a key factor. As you know, sir, a doctor and a lawyer and so on will be able to provide convincing qualifications. And sometimes we wonder how genuine things like the barber's qualification is going to be and the carpenter's qualification. Barbados, I know, has put its house in order. But there are some people, I believe, that up to now still have a little bit more to do. And once they are coming here, and they now have to take a course in order to get that valid piece of certification, sir, let them do it. Let them do it. Let them take the course in order to get the certification before they reach these shores. And as I said, sir, Barbados has come a real, real long way. Real, real long. And I think we should be proud of what we have done. We have places like the TVET Council that, where the CVQs and the NVQs are concerned, on top of everything. TVET Council. We have places like the Polytechnic and Training Board and those places now that actually give their own certification. Excuse me. And many of the courses that are offered today, you can get certificates for. And it was not so before, where you could get, you can now get a qualification in hairdressing. You can get a qualification in dressmaking. You can get qualification in masonry, in tiling, in carpentry, in plumbing. And this was unheard of when I was at school. You think you could get... The fellow who used to do a bit of trade with an older fellow, that is how he qualified. I remember, sir, when my aunt wanted to do dressmaking, she had to go down by Miss Glenn to do her, and she became an excellent dressmaker. But nothing to show for it. Nothing to show that she was qualified. But nowadays, sir, you get it. You can get it. And I would also urge the authorities to make good background checks on those who seek entry under this CARICOM initiative. Even those people like lawyers and doctors and so on. And I also want to urge associations such as BAP and such as the Bar Association to be in constant contact with the similar association in the other countries, because there will always be people who want to move from one place to the next for reasons other than work too. And therefore, you have to be very, very careful with them. having said all that, so this is only a way of formalizing what Barbadians had long been doing. And if it is one island in the Caribbean that should never have this go back where it come from attitude, one island in the Caribbean that should never have this, if so welcome, wait for call, it is Barbados. It is Barbados. The movement of Barbadian professionals through the Caribbean has been going on, sir, for many, many years. We had gone through the Caribbean, sir, as teachers, as policemen, as public servants for decades. We went to Bahamas in droves to teach. We went to Bermuda, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Turks and Caicos. I went there, Cayman Islands, I went there. We went to all those, and for years, sir, Barbadians have been doing it. And all that is happening now is that the types of trades, the types of skills, and the types of other forms of other gainful employment, we're now expanding those skills. And the movement, sir, is now being better organized and better regulated. But as Senator Franklin said earlier, sir, that some Barbadians fell in love in the territories and with the territories. And there's a distinction there. They fell in love in the territories and with the territories. And sir, we may talk till the cows come home. I know people who, when you mention places like Turks and Caicos and Cayman, may say, man, there's remote places and things. Let me warn you now. And Senator Bratt would bear me out on this. You see Turks and Caicos and Cayman Islands, Barbados is, they are just as advanced, or something even more advanced than Barbados. And I'm serious. I live in both of them, and I could tell you. And Senator Grant visited there, he could tell you too. So, I can also, the point that I want to make was this, that I know people in both Cayman and the Turks and Caicos Islands who will never set foot back in Barbados again. Some of my best friends will never live here again. Never. And they've said that. I will never come back to Barbados to live. I love this place. You ain't see them again. And so while the skill sets and so on have been expanded, so I personally have noticed in recent years, and I'm very happy about it too, I've noticed that many of the territories, the ones that I mentioned, the BVI and those, Turks and those places, that those places are now self-sufficient in teachers in particular, in teachers. That you don't have to pick up the 10 and 12 and send them to those places anymore. They're self-sufficient in the area of teaching. And to some extent, Barbadians have to be commended because Barbadians work hard in teaching in the BVI, in Bermuda, Bahamas, Turks, and so on, Antigua. And I always used to remark that Barbadians seem to work harder overseas than they work here in Barbados. I always remark that. You know, sir, I used to, every Saturday, 9:30 to 12:30, every Saturday that I was there, in both places, I gave lessons from 9:30 to 12:30 on Saturday, free, never charged a cent. I remember those children would always say, we learn more on Saturdays than we learn during the week. And they used to learn during the week. But there was a kind of informal, I don't know what it was. But it was so to me too that you got home and you drilled home to them in that Saturday setting a bit more than usual. But I say that to say this. I remember one Saturday morning, I used to ride a little Honda 50 to go to school. But a friend of mine, Trinidadian friend of mine, he wanted to borrow it, and he came over to the school where I was, and I came to give him the key. He said, "I'm glad you come here. I want to talk to you." This Trinidadian fella said, "Look, these children are not Barbadian children, they're Trinidadian children." He said, "And you spoon feeding these children too much." He said, "You spoon feeding these children." He said, "What do you think is going to happen sooner or later? These people are going to produce their own nurses and their own doctors and the lawyers and things and their own teachers in particular," he was saying. "And then there won't be any use for people like me and you." That was his perspective. That was his perspective. And the thing about it, that made me not annoyed, but he ended up by telling me, if you're going to feed them, spoon feed her with a teaspoon. That was his attitude. It was never mine. It was never mine. And I can safely say that one of the students that I taught eventually became the principal of that same school. They used to always had to bring in principals and bring in teachers, but they're self-sufficient now. I didn't see anything negative about it, but that particular fella, he thought so. And I want to say that my experience too in teaching overseas is that Barbadian teachers, let me say this, Barbadian teachers were loved. They were loved. They preferred the Barbadian to the Trinidadian to the Guyanese to the Jamaican, because they seem to have had a different attitude altogether. Like Senator Franklin, I also support the initiative of the contingent rates. I support that, where those who work over there were allowed to have their wives, their husbands, and so on with them. And I can safely say that when I taught in both places, that was also allowed. And it was not only allowed because they were a step ahead. The spouses were allowed to work as well. Huh? No, I didn't have one. I didn't have a spouse. Sorry to say, but I didn't have a spouse. But I didn't want to call the names like Skinner and Spooner. And those, Spooner from up with you. Yeah. But yes, and I agree with that. I agree with that. Because whether you are working as a fellow who goes to Canada picking fruit, or whether you're working as a missionary, whatever you're doing, yes, I agree that you would prefer if your spouse would have been there by your side. I was part of the cabinet, sir, in 1994. And then in the late 90s and 2000s, I remember the time when Barbados was awash with Guyanese workers. And in that time, we grew more food than the Guyanese played a major role in it. Barbadian shopkeepers and so on did extremely well when they were here. Business expanded. The economy did better. And I think it was a mistake of ours to drive them out in the way we did. Senator Franklin, I do remember there again, I don't know, I quoted from Franklin very much. But I remember Senator Franklin did make the point that we were discussing immigration. And I think he made the point that Guyanese and St. Lucians and so on who live and work and pay taxes in Barbados should be allowed to access our health care from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital without having to pay through their nose and so on for it. And I think that this goes some way into remedying that particular situation. We Barbadians have done well in other territories overseas. There's a young man from Bayfield, and he went to Trinidad and Tobago and he taught them boat building 20 years ago. And he opened a flying fish processing plant there. And he was very, very well treated. Became very, very successful. Fella from the most humble beginnings. Boy, fella still there. And every year now, the same thing seems to be happening. That a lot of the young doctors, in fact, sometimes the QH is so full that some of our young doctors have to go overseas to complete their internship and to look for work. I know, sir, of 3 who are in Tobago. They're Barbadian businesses operating in parts of the Caribbean. But, sir, the final point I want to make is that we have to just be guarded and to watch out for abuse in the system, because whatever you do, people are going to try to abuse the system. Regardless of what you do, people are going to. You could try to dot all your I's and cross all, but people are going to try to pull a fast one on you. And the same teaching experience that I was talking about, we had about 4 chaps who were there, and they were not qualified teachers, and they used to get qualified teachers' pay. And when the check was made on them, some had just been run out of St. Martin, some run out of Bahamas, and they were just going from territory to territory. And I don't know if they had, but every time you catch up with them, they ran. And regardless of what we do, we are going to find people who will try to abuse the system. There will be ones who come as skilled workers who have no skills whatsoever. And so, Mr. President, I just thought it would be a good thing if I would share some of my experiences and my thoughts with the members of the Senate. And as I said before, I fully support the bill. Thank you very much.
President, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 1:40 to facilitate lunch.
The question is that this session be now suspended until 1:40 for purposes of lunch.
That's a bit soon. That's a bit soon. Yes.
2:40, I'm sorry, 2:40.
Mr. President, I do wish to revise that to 2:40 because 1:40 gives us barely 35 minutes to eat. And so, sir, I beg to move that we suspend for 2:40.
2:40. All honorable members in favor of the suspension until 2:40. Say aye. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Take the ayes of it, and we are now at lunch.